Well,
He could he couldn't be any
most
happier than I am.
most of them want to be with their peers. I mean, that's
Yes.
what they want. So, um, let me see how many we've got with us right now.
About
Um,
54.
we've got a lot with us. Still, they're still coming on. Give it another minute or two. Um, but I've been working on that place at the beach as well. I went last Thursday when we had class last Thursday. I was there during that storm. I I went to the beach on Thursday, came back on Friday night, turned around and went back on Saturday morning, came back on Saturday night, and turned around and went back after church on Sunday. Uh, but I
So
finished
how
what I needed to finish. So I've got that much behind me right now. So
so how far away is your beach place?
it takes me about, with the traffic, if the traffic's not bad, I can get there in about an hour and 20 minutes, um, depending on the traffic. If
Right.
it was open road, because it's country roads, uh, I can't, I'm not supposed to go but 55 miles per hour, even on the open road. But I keep up with the rest of the people, and sometimes it's more than 55 miles per hour. Well,
Good excuse.
yes, that's it. Well, it's after 7, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and others I hope will join, and they are joining. But we just want to welcome you to week 5 of your 601 class, and I've said it every week. But wow, how time is flying. Um, Dr. Reff,
Dr.
I can't
Stedman.
believe that this is our 5th week under the belt, and I can't. This is week 5 because we're here. So
Doc-
this is week 5. But just want you to
Dr.
look.
Stedman, can you hear me?
Do what?
There are a couple of students struggling to get in. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. It's the same link that we've been using, so I don't know what. Is
I
this?
had trouble. I had trouble getting in too. It kept spinning and spinning.
Well,
So
it could be the system then. It could be. Hopefully they'll be able to get in. Others are getting in. It could be the system then. Zoom. A lot of people could be on Zoom tonight, and that could be the problem. So, but thanks for sharing that, both of you. Was that Shannon that shared that?
Yes, sir.
Shannon, if they get in, just somehow just say they got in and let me know, okay?
Okay, will do.
If you know who they are, either of you. Okay, thank you. But anyway, let's look briefly at what this week looks like. And again, I have to remind you again, even though you don't hear us talk a lot about the topics and the resources and the readings, that doesn't exempt you from doing what you're supposed to do. And again, we've reiterated this more than one time, that we should see evidences of the authors and the uses of these resources and these reading materials in the work that you're doing. And especially when you begin your Zoom meetings and you have what we call the scholarly conversations, then we should hear and witness evidence that, because we've read all these materials, we have them, we know how all this ties into what you're doing. So we just want to see evidence that you're doing your part on that as well. So I have to remind you of that. Let's look at our assignments for this week. Again, if it's in red, that means it's dealing with the evidence on the AAPSL, and everything's in red. So everything you're turning in this week has to do with the AAPSL. Just a reminder that the task 3 that you submitted for our review this past Sunday, if there was anything that needed to be cleaned up, it needs to be cleaned up, sent back to Dr. Revis and me if there was something that we needed to look at. And then this will be submitted. Once we say that it's okay, you don't even have to wait until Sunday night. You can go ahead and, if we say it's okay, then you go ahead and submit it into the AAPSL assignment Dropbox and get that over with. And we'll tell you to move on to task 4, which you're going to do that anyway after tonight. Then your AAPSL task 3 peer reviews, 2 are due again at the end of this week, and many of you have already taken care of that. If you have not, then go ahead and get your peer reviews done, because if you don't and you wait until the last minute, they may do you some good, but they're not going to do your peers any good. So please make sure you do that. And again, we bragged on you last week, so don't backslide on us. There were 3 or 4 that your peer reviews were not as detailed as they were in the past. So I'm asking you, don't slack up. And I know you get tired sometimes, but make sure you give it your best when you're doing that. The AAPSL task, when I say task 1 and 2, the AAPSL Zoom conference must occur this week. And as a reminder, remember that whoever the Zoom captain is, the Zoom leader is, that they will be responsible for sending out the link for the Zoom session. They'll be responsible for recording it into a video and sending you the link, and each of you will drop that link into the assignment Dropbox. And if you go to where you dropped your peer reviews, it's the last item where you dropped your peer reviews in Blackboard, where you drop that. All of you will review. Just because all of you were in the same team doesn't mean we'll look at one video. But just a reminder, all of you may or may not get the same grade, because remember, we're going to look at how well each of you contribute and participate in these Zoom sessions. And then this is what we're going to introduce today, in tonight's class, is the AAPSL Task 4. And that draft will be due, just like 1, 2, and 3 have been due. That Task 4 draft will be due for peer and instructor review no later than Sunday night at 9 o'clock. But that's a look at where we are this week. I'm not going to pull up well, I am. Give me a second. If I can get this to cooperate. Let me pull up week 6. Just to show you that, and you can see that the process has been pretty similar each week. Next week, what you do in task 4 this week will be due for a grade next week, a final grade next week. But we're going to introduce task 5 next week. Task 5 will not have any peer reviews, but we're going to go into next week. We'll talk about these are the competencies that you will have met this semester, and we're going to talk about the 12 that you must do for the AAPSL, and then we'll talk about what is left will be due for the APTEL. But we're going to go into detail with that next week. Next week's class probably will not be as long, and we'll sign off if we can. We're there if we need to be, but we're probably going to sign off a little bit early so that gives you time to move forward and get some of the things done as we are beginning to bring closure to the APSL. So that's where we are with what we're going to be doing today and next week. Dr. Revis, talk to the students about task 3 of the APSL.
Okay, well, I feel like I had some really quality work handed in on your draft, and some of you just had a few minor things to have to tweak and change, and in order to be ready for final submission. I always try to grade them as quickly as possible, or look at them. And so if I say you're ready with this minor revision to submit for final evaluation, I would like for you to wait until your peers review your work before you go ahead and submit for a final evaluation. So, but as soon as you do that, then go ahead, as Dr. Stedman said, and send those to me for final evaluation. I thought,
may I interject something? That's important because the purpose is that we read your work, we look at your work, but we're looking specifically, we're looking for things sometimes differently than what your peers will be looking for or looking at. They may catch something that our eyes simply did not catch. So just don't take for granted that when Dr. Revis reads it or I read it, that's the end of the story, because we may miss something. And I have seen some corrections made by your peers that I know that I missed, and I appreciate the peer review process taking care of that. Go ahead, Dr. Revis. I'm sorry.
oh, that's fine. We told you we would be very flexible with whether you did your literature review first or your annotated bibliography, and some of you did it in different ways. The only thing that I would say is if you do your literature review first, then start prompt 2 with your annotated bibliography, or vice versa. They should not both go in the same prompt. So other than that, and had some really good graphs and charts and tables with some of your programs that you are considering or that you at least researched, and that was good in your prompt 2. And be sure to just document all your resources, and you should be good to go. So I was very pleased. Some of you need a little more tweaking than others, but that's the way it goes, and that's why we have the process that we have, so that you have time to do your revisions and resubmit. Our goal here is not just to get a class grade, for you to get a class grade. Our goal is for you to have quality work so that when you submit it to that blind evaluator in Tastering, that you can be assured that you get at least a 3, if not a 4. And we always shoot for the level 4 because that's the highest score. So again, that's why we do this revision process, and want you to hand the best work possible.
Dr. Revis.
Yes.
This is Tamika. Can you restate your comment? You said if we start with the literature review, then the annotated bibliography should be in prompt 2?
Correct.
Dr. Revis.
Yes.
And if that's the way you want yours, that's okay. I did not require mine to do it that way.
Okay.
So I'm not going to require them to go back and to change that in either order. I understand what you're saying, and that's okay if you have directed yours, but I don't want mine to get confused. I didn't look at it that way, and that's okay because instructors do look at things differently sometimes, so that doesn't make it right or wrong. So if you were in my classes and I gave you permission, I accepted the way you had it, so you're okay with it in my class. But if you're in Dr. Revis's, you follow her directions on that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Tamika?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay,
Thank
okay. Okay. I was expecting that question, Dr. Revis, when you said that, because I knew how I had looked at it. So, and that's okay. That's okay. We're going to move on with task 4, introducing task 4. First of all, I want to say the work, the quality of work that has come in, I have been very, very impressed overall with the quality of work. And how task 3 came in, Dr. Revis, I will say that I probably had the least edits that I can remember. I mean, the APA was done well. You know, the formatting was done well. So I was very impressed overall with how task 3 was done. As we look at task 4, let's look at the top. The candidate, and I'm actually from the template. I'm going to refer. When I talk about things, I'm actually we're looking at the template because I think you need to see the template because that's what we follow. However, my notes and my comments and Dr. Revis's comments will come from a lot from the AAPSL helpful hints for task 4. So I would say look at your template carefully and follow that template, but have your helpful hints document printed out and beside you so that you can look at it, and it's almost like a checklist. You can check it off and say, yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. But what you're going to do in task 4, you're going to lead your PLC in the research and development of an action plan proposal that you're going to present to your principal or to the administrative team. In narrative form, you're going to lead the PLC in the development of the action plan with a focus on your role as the leader, with references to the degree of collaboration, shared governance, and delegated responsibilities. The action plan is a concise and informative presentation that graphically highlights the research, data analysis, and expected outcomes, and is to be presented to the school's administrative team. Now let's go back. In task 1, if you remember, in task 1, you basically were identifying what is a PLC. You did your PLC research. You decided who your team was going to be. You set up meeting norms. You established all of that, and you got the ball rolling. When you got to task 2, if you remember, in task 2, you began your data collection strategies, your criteria and process for identifying a most pressing need. You collaboratively analyzed the data, and then at the end of the day, you came up with, you said, this is what we consider to be the most pressing need for our school at this time, and you ask permission from your principal if you could move forward with that most pressing need, and trying to come up with a plan of action that to try to make things better. And in task 3, you did a literature review, you did an annotated bibliography, and you looked for things, you looked for stuff out there, good research-based things that would hopefully help you to begin attacking that problem. You looked for things that would, I would say, I call it medicine for your problem. You wanted to solve the problem. You wanted to get the sickness over with, whatever the sickness in the school was. And so you looked for solutions for that. So in task 4, what you're doing now, you're taking everything that you have done up to this point, and you're going to put it into a plan of action, because you want to be able to present something at this point that says, yes, we've identified the problem, we've looked for medicines or cures, programs, whatever, that we feel is going to help alleviate the problem or help make things better, and this is how we're going to do it. So I want us to look at what you see in yellow. Remember, we said that if it's in black, it stays. If it's in yellow, that means that it's highlighted there for a purpose, and you're going to do narrative work. You're going to write something. So where you say, and then once you write it, remember, you take the yellow away. So don't forget to do that. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You see 7 headings there. Each one of these is a topic. It's a heading. You're going to write the importance of the action plan, research-based, just like you see it. And underneath that, in narrative form, this is what you're to do. Your narrative work will address the purpose of the action plan based on what the research says. You would need to reference the research here. We are not looking for your opinion now. What does the research say? We want to know what the research says, not what I think about this. Again, your narrative work is going to address the purpose. What is the purpose of this action plan? Why are you doing it? And you're going to base that on what the research says. Based on the research, this is why we're doing this action plan. You're going to need to reference the research here. And again, remember, we're not looking for your opinion. Now, we're not looking for a dissertation there. We're not looking for 4 or 5 paragraphs there. We want you to be, we want you to say enough but we want you to say what needs to be said and you move on. It could be a good professionally written paragraph would cover that. Again, what is the purpose of this action plan based on research? The next heading is going to be alignment.
Dr. Stedman,
Yes.
are we using the research that we did initially, and are we pulling the research that we did in the first two tasks to answer that question?
You could, but
Okay.
again, you can use that, or what does the research say about an action plan? What is an action plan? Why would you need an action plan? What does the research say about an action plan? Now you can go back and you can tie in some of the things that you've already talked about, but basically you're just setting the foundation of what is the based on the research, what is the importance of an action plan? What does the research say about an action plan?
Dr. Stedman.
Yes.
So we're focused on the research based on the action plan and not our most pressing need.
At this point, yes. You're talking about why do I even need an action plan?
Okay.
You got to know, to be able to write an action plan, you need to know what one is. Does that make sense?
It
Based
does.
on
Thanks
the
for
research,
clarifying.
what is an action plan?
Okay.
Now, Lakeisha, in that, you can talk about your most pressing need in that. You could tie it in there, but you don't have to at this point. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for asking that question. And Dr. Revis, if you need to chime in at any time, you do that. Let's go to the
Okay.
next heading. Alignment with student learning outcomes. Your action plan must align completely with student learning outcomes as measured by test scores or summative assessments. You're to narratively explain that alignment in this section. Okay. The end result is you've identified a problem, and the problem, remember, we said had to be tied to student achievement. So how are you going to align everything in your action plan to what the outcomes should be? You know what the outcomes ultimately, you know what you want them to be. You want improved student learning in whatever you have identified as your most pressing need. Okay, how is all of this going to be aligned? Again, your action plan must align completely with student learning outcomes as measured by test scores. In other words, what are you going to use? How are you going to determine? How is it going to align itself? Dr. Revis, would you like to make a comment there?
Now we're switching to talking about the action plan, your action plan. So, sometimes, guys, I think the graphic organizer that you must use, I have found that it's easier sometimes to fill out the action plan graphic organizer and then write from it, just like we have our students do. They do a graphic organizer first and then they write from. If you feel like you need to do that first, that's great. You can do it, but this part is the narrative part.
And we're going to get to the graphic organizer next, and we're following it the way it's given to us. So, I mean, we have no choice but to present it this way, but that's a good point, Dr. Revis, that you pointed out. And we'll come back to this in a minute as you think about it and if you have questions. Then let's go to the third topic, third heading. Your heading is short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives. In this area, you must clearly define all goals and objectives for the action plan and provide what they are and when they are going to be implemented and measured. Now, I would clearly delineate in here, what are my short-term goals? What can I come up with that I can get some immediate results from? Then what are my midterm goals? I can't do this now, but we can introduce this now and we can work on it. And then about midterm, this is probably where we should be. And then what are my long-term goals? So you're going to establish 3 sets of goals. Your short-term goals, you're going to list what they are. What are my midterm goals? And what are my long-term goals? And remember, all of these goals are going to be goals that you and your team establish that's going to help attack the identified problem. You're focusing on that, the most pressing need. These goals that you're establishing are supposed to help, you're setting goals to attack that problem and to try to meet those needs. The short-term goals, when you look at your short-term goals, what can I do now? What can I do midway? And then what's going to take me a little bit longer? Dr. Revis, any comments on that?
No, I think that's fine. That's great.
Okay, and again, we'll come back and after you think about it, we'll answer questions later on as well. Your 4th topic is specific activities aligned with the designated goals and objectives. Okay, now you've set up your short-term goals and objectives in the previous one. Now, what are you going to do to meet those goals? You must identify all aligned activities that will be used that's going to meet your short-term. How are you going to meet that short-term goal? What programs, what activities, what plans? How are you going to meet those midterm goals? What programs, what activities, plans? How are you going to meet those long-term goals? Again, what programs, activities, plans? What are you proposing to do? You have to do something there. What are those somethings that's going to be done? Any comments, Dr. Revis? Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Your heading is Indicators of Success with Measurement Techniques. Okay, now you've set goals and objectives. You said this is what we're going to do. These are the programs, the plans, these are the activities that we're going to do to try to meet those goals and objectives. Well, now, how do you know that you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish? How do you know that you have successfully reached your short-term, your midterm, and your long-term goals for your action plan? And what measurement techniques have been put in place to make that determination? You've got to think about this. Your team and you have to think about this. How are you going to know that you're accomplishing what you set out to accomplish? The next heading is clarification of roles and responsibility. Again, who has been assigned to do what? Who? You name people. You identify people here. Who has been assigned to do what? And what have they been assigned to do? You name the people involved and you say what they're going to do. If it's your literacy coach at the school that's assigned to do something, then you say the literacy coach and you explain that. If it's the classroom teachers because of instruction that you've given them, then who is going to be responsible? If it's you as the PLC leader, then you identify PLC leader. If it's the principal, you identify the principal, but we've got to know who and what they're going to do. You clarify who and what are their roles and responsibilities. And then we have, lastly, formative and summative assessment criteria. Now this is where, listen carefully, because this is where people mess up a lot of times. And again, we've explained this clearly in your AAPSL Helpful Hints document under number 9. Formative assessments are used to determine if programs are being implemented with fidelity. How do you know? Now, the people that you've talked about up there that you've assigned roles, you just say, you give them a role and just say, have at it. But how do you know that what you've assigned for people to do, if it's teachers you've assigned, how do you know that they have done what has been assigned to do? There must be fidelity checks along the way. So formative assessments are for people. It's looking at what people do or what people don't do, you know, whatever. But somebody's got to do that. What is your formative assessment criteria? Who's going to go back and who's going to determine if the people that's been assigned to carry out all the above, who's going to be responsible for determining whether they've successfully accomplished what needs to be accomplished? That's the fidelity check. And formative assessments are for people, for the grown people, not the children. It's for the grown people. You're working with adults there. And then summative assessments, we know that they're used to determine if what has been implemented is making a difference. And summative assessments are for the students involved. At the end of the day, the summative assessments gives us a basis, again, what was accomplished based on the children we were serving, the students that we were serving. That could be, an example is the EOG testing, EOC testing, any other type of assessments that you would use in kindergarten or first grade, those in the post assessments that you would do with those instruments. But that would be what summative assessment criteria you could, and there should be more than just one. It's not going to just be EOG testing. If we had counted on EOG testing this past year, then we would have been up the creek without a paddle, wouldn't we? Because we didn't have EOG testing. So guess what? You had to look at something else. It could have been the last benchmark testing that you did. But just know that assessment criteria, formative and summative, can be multiple assessments. And you should look at all of the ways that you can assess what you're doing. Okay, now I want you to look again. Narratively, you're going to write something under every one of these based on, again, you're going to identify what an action plan is based on what the research says. And then all of this is going to be written in a way that you're focusing on attacking that problem that you've identified. Okay, that all of this is centered around, the action plan is centered around that identified need, most pressing need for your school. Now, this is the chart that you will begin using, and you'll see this chart consistently throughout the program. And you're going to hear Dr. Lamb talk about it a lot too, because he believes in this chart. Now, it talks about a PERT chart, and I'll show you a PERT chart that is optional. This is not optional. Everything that you've talked about up there, I want you to look. These headings are going to be just like you see them here. Do not change anything. Specific activity, and you notice but you can have as many columns under here as you need. What are the specific activities in your action plan? What is the timeline? You know, when are you going to begin it? When will it end? The timeline for these specific activities. Who are the persons responsible, the people responsible for that particular activity? What resources will you need? Again, resources could be material resources. It may be monetary resources. If you need money, then you've got to put it in there, because you're going to have to talk with your principal about if there's money that you need. If you got to purchase something, then you've got to talk about, are there Title I monies there to be able to purchase what I need, or other resources? Then your formative assessment method. Okay, the person's responsible for carrying out these activities. This is the fidelity check. How do you know that these persons here are doing what you said right here. The summative assessment, this is for the students. What will that summative assessment be? What is your goal for that specific activity? And then how do you know that you have accomplished what you said that you set out to do? Again, you've written about stuff up here. Now you're organizing it down here. Now, Dr. Revis made a clear point. This may be easier for you to do. It has to be in this order still, but you may decide, I want to go ahead and attack this first, and I can build my narrative work from this. Or some of you may be just good writers and you can say, I'm going to do this first, and then I can go back and I can break it down and put it in here. It doesn't matter to us, you know, which way you do it. But this is the graphic organizer that you must use for your action plan. And remember, this action plan, everything here is all centered around that one identified most pressing need. Underneath here, this is an example of a PERT chart. Some people they're very creative, they're artistic. This is optional. We have some students that just love to do this because it helps them understand things better as well. It doesn't mean I can read yours and understand what you do, but this drives me crazy, Dr. Revis. I do not like to do. Give me this simple stuff right here and I can move on. But I love the creativity of students when they choose to add this as well. Dr. Revis, we're going to go move on to prompt 2, and then we'll come back and answer questions after all of this. They've had time to digest some of it. So you go on with prompt 2.
If I could just add something to prompt 1, I would say this. Guys, this would be very quick and easy for you to do on your own, but you're not doing and building your action plan on your own. You're collaborating with your PLC in building that action plan. So be sure that's evident in your narrative that you have collaborated with your members of your PLC to complete that action plan. Okay.
Dr. Revis, and thank you, that's a good point. I would say though, when you meet with your PLC, there's nothing wrong with you having done some pre-work and go into the meeting with already some good stuff on the table to lay out there. You don't have to go in there blinded and not have anything. Just make sure that they are a part of the process. Thank you, Dr. Revis, for that.
Okay. So once you finish your narrative work and you fill out your plan template, then it's time to share that with your principal and or your administrative team. Now, this presentation could be a video, most likely will be, considering the issues that we're dealing with. You don't have to videotape it, but if you don't videotape it and you do it virtually, at least do a screenshot. And there must also be an agenda. And if you're going to present a PowerPoint or a Google slide, it would be great if you could provide a copy of that PowerPoint. And your focus here is sharing your, excuse me, your research and your action plan with your administrative team or your principals. So let's go on down through here, and you've got some more narrative work to do, not as much as in the first prompt, but the first one is building efficacy. And here in a brief paragraph or two, you're going to talk about the research around building teacher efficacy to improve student achievement. When we say you're going to pull from your research now, that means you're going to have to go to Dover Library or go to some of your text, course text, and pull some information about building teacher efficacy. The second heading is strategies for sustained growth. What does the research say about moving forward as a school in the quest for improving student achievement? The third topic, issues concerning diversity. What are the issues that you're dealing with in your school concerning diversity? And this can include anything from, what kinds of things are out there that's going to hinder the growth process? That if so, if those are identified, you need to talk about those in your narrative and in your presentation, and it should also be reflected in your action plan. When we talk about diversity, we're talking about different student groups, your exceptional children, your ESL students, your migrant students, etc. Those kinds of students, how are you going to move forward, and are you going to have to think about things in a specialized way or manner with for these students? And then lastly, you have your resource section, and that is identifying to your administrative team what are the necessary resources that we need in order to carry out this action plan. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, my principal's they're not going to go along with this action plan. That's neither here nor there. You present it as if they would consider it. It doesn't matter if they don't, but you are building an action plan and you're presenting that to your administrative team. And then lastly, establishing a shared vision. So what? Now we've gone through all this process of looking at data, identifying a need, researching possible solutions, building an action plan. So now what? How do we move and mobilize our staff so that we can establish this shared vision of student learning and actually implement some of the pieces of the action plan? Or if you were a principal, you would want people to implement all of that action plan. And so here we're looking at some research about moving your staff forward and establishing that shared vision of learning. And so lastly, you always end your tasks with a reference section and then your appendices. Any questions on prompt 2?
Dr. Revis, again, when you look at building efficacy, again, we're looking at a good solid paragraph on efficacy. And each of these, you're not looking at, major research. You're looking at what does the research say. And as long as we've got a good, solid, good, sound paragraph for each of these, we're okay with that. Okay? But again, remember APA, if you research, again, this is not your opinion. This is what the research says right here. So when you look at that, I can tell you, when you go to building efficacy, now he's old, but he's the father of efficacy, Albert Bandura, Bandura. I would think, that possibly because he started this, so I would think that Bandura would be a good person to name it that. But there's lots of many others that have pioneered after him that have built on the concept of efficacy. You're going to address this in much greater detail when you get to the AAPSL and you're dealing with your teacher empowerment and teacher leadership plan. This is just an introduction of looking at what efficacy is, for teachers.
Dr. Stedman, we have a question in the text box.
Okay.
If you focus on a specific group of students, would you possibly still have issues concerning diversity?
Okay, say that again. I could not hear you, Dr. Revis.
I said, if you focused on a specific group of students, would you possibly still have an issue concerning diversity?
Absolutely, because no two students are going to be the same in any group. So even with that, you've got to look at possible areas of diversity. And if you don't think there's any there, you've got to be able to prove why. But I would think that with any group of students, that there is going to be some type of diversity. And I will tell you, when we, and let's just be real, when you look at even at a group of students, there's age differences. Age that we know that 6 months makes a big difference when you're dealing with kindergarten students or first grade students. the maturity level. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. That would be a form of diversity. The age would be if you're dealing with a mixed population of students, males and females. We know that research says that girls have a tendency to mature faster than boys do. And so if you've got, that can be a form of diversity. And there, I mean, there's lots of things that we need to look at. And if you have a question about any of you, if you want to just shoot Dr. Revis and me an email, or you want to call us, if you're not quite understand how diversity would be with your group, feel free to talk to us individually about that.
Dr. Stebbin, so, I mean, once again, I don't meet with my administrative team doesn't meet until Mondays. And so I have them put me on the agenda. So can I continue to submit my work on Sunday and then go back and fix it on Monday once I've met?
And just Joy, and just say that in your work, try to get as much done as you can. And now what's going to happen, a lot of times we will see, it doesn't mean that you've done bad work, but if it's not complete, we're not going to say 100 and move on. We may say a 90, and then when you submit it, we'll go back and reevaluate your grade and put the 100 in there, based on when you finish it. But that's absolutely okay to do that if it's something that's pending.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that question.
Sorry. And again, if our principal and one of our assistant principals is part of our PLC, and we are, presenting kind of to them at that same time as the PLC, we just need to indicate that.
Yes, and several have asked that question, and when it wasn't clear, we did. I went back and I told them, I said, just make sure that you make it very obvious that your principal was a part of that, and that was the reason why there was not an additional presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
When you were talking about formative assessments, and you said that was for the adults.
Formative is for the adults, yes.
So are we looking at student achievement to discuss what, like the adults instruction, or like how are we doing that, separating the difference between what the students are doing and how we're evaluating the actual teachers and instruction that's happening?
Okay, I don't quite understand. Dr. Revis, did you understand what was being asked?
I think they're kind of two different things. When we're asking you to focus on the formative assessment, again, that's the monitoring piece. Who in your building is going to monitor and make sure that these strategies or programs are being implemented with fidelity by your teaching staff? That's kind of what that whole thing is about. I'm not sure if I caught the question either, Joy, so ask again.
Joy, you ask it again, Joy, I'm sorry.
So yeah, and that's kind of, so when you were saying that the formative assessment was for the adults, I think I was getting confused in what you were trying to say. But if you're asking, like, who is basically doing the teacher observations and stuff, is that what we're putting for formative? And then the summative is the student data, what they did.
Okay, that's a good thing. Let's just say that teacher observations is going to be one of the criteria that's who's going to be doing the observations. Okay, it would be the in other words, if you're asking the teachers to do something and nobody ever goes in and observes them, then you don't know that it's being done. But if you set up observations and you say that I'm going to go in and do it, you're the leader, and the principal allows you to go in, then that would be a fidelity check there, and that would be a formative assessment. If the principal says I will do the observations, or in my walkthroughs I'm going to do this, then the principal, that would be a fidelity check, and that would be a formative that would be a formative assessment there, because that is, you're looking at the adults who are in charge of what is supposed to be
Okay.
done. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. It
Okay,
does. It does.
thank you. Okay. I know this stuff can get confusing sometimes. I have to think about it myself. Okay, other questions right now? Let me just make sure.
I think I've called everything in the chat box. And guys, once again, when you get into this, when you roll your sleeves up after this session tonight, if you get into it and you have questions, that's when you need to shoot us an email so we can help you on the front end, and so you're not going down a wrong pathway.
Let me suggest something else too. You've heard us talk tonight. I know it's got to digest. I would suggest that you do your Zoom team on the apps, or your Zoom presentation or your Zoom meeting sooner than later. If you planned to meet with your team this weekend sometime, or before, I wouldn't wait until I would get it done as soon as I could this week, because if there's 3 or 4 or 5 of you in that group, then you can play off each other and ask each other questions about what does this mean to you. You can learn from each other. So I would include a conversation about this in my AAPSL conversation in my Zoom team meeting. You can learn a lot from each other with this. I think once you look at it and you start breaking it down, I don't think you're going to have major problems with it. You've done an excellent job up to this point, and I don't see this being a problem as well.
Dr. Stedman, could we talk just a little bit more about the Zoom task, the Zoom tasks 1 and 2 recording that they have to do this week?
Okay, you want to make some comments on it as well?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If we could take a turn to that. I just want to say I've already had one team turn an outstanding recording in. But one thing that you need to do, and if you're the Zoom master, please take a moment at the beginning of the session to allow each individual team member to introduce themselves, because that helps me and Dr. Stedman make a name-face connection with who's talking. Because I take notes, I script everything you say so that I can go back and then evaluate your contributions, your individual contributions. And I will say the team that have already sent theirs into me, I think it's team 1, did an outstanding job. They were very well prepared. The Zoom master had an agenda built. It was really a good meeting. But take a moment to introduce yourselves so we know who is talking when.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Ravis. I had forgotten. It does make big difference if you identify. We see a lot of you, but some of you don't ever let us see who you are. So we still haven't been able to put names and faces together with everybody yet. So that does help a lot. Just a reminder, there will not be a coaching session on Thursday night. They're over with until we get to the end of this when we finish the AAPSL, then Dr. Lamb will do about week 8, 7 or 8, I can't remember. He'll do a town hall again, talking about the APTEL, and then we will do 2 Thursday nights, not 4, but we'll do 2 Thursday nights after we start the APTEL to make sure that everybody's on the right track with that. And then he will go back and review some of the things at that point with your competency folio, because some of you will have forgotten it by then. I understand that. So he'll do some reminders then. Also, just a reminder, I had this question. I if you're in Dr. Revis's class, I am your clinical coach too. And if you're in my 2 classes, she's your clinical coach too, which means that you can submit work for us to review. You can call on us over and beyond your instructor if there's a need for that. Don't confuse us with your clinical coach 1. Your clinical coach 1 is a one-time deal for the most part. They will do that initial Zoom meeting with you, your principal and you. They'll welcome you to the program. They'll make sure that, if there's any issues, but Dr. Revis and I as clinical coaches too will not be a part of that meeting. So just make sure, and if you don't know who your clinical coach 1 is and you have not heard from that person yet, you need to let us know so we can let Dr. Lamb know about that, because you should know who that person is and they should have already reached out to you at this point.
Okay, Dr. Stedman, I have a question.
Yes,
Regarding that, who should we be turning in our clinical hour sheets to?
Okay, Stephanie, you will turn yours into Dr. Revis
Okay,
because you're in my class.
okay,
So your clinical hours will go to Dr. Revis if you're in my classes, and if you're in Dr. Revis's class, your clinical hours will go to me. And the same thing with your first round, the 21 competencies that will go into your folio. If you're in my 2 classes, Dr. Revis will review them and approve them. If you're in Dr. Revis's class, I will review them and I will approve them. We'll approve them, yes.
okay.
But you turn in your clinical hours in your portfolio. You don't just send them to me.
Right.
Okay.
And we'll
Okay,
talk
so-
about it. Stephanie, we're not quite there yet. So we'll talk about that more towards the end of the semester. So you'll know exactly what to do and where to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question about the clinical hours, if I may. Well, I guess a 2-part question. We don't turn it in until we've got 80, I assume. And I mean, you guys don't have to look at it, halfway through or anything like that.
No.
And if so, I guess how can we be sure that what we're doing is going to count?
I will tell you, Joel, we're unless you submit something and you say you want 40, 20 or 30 hours credit for doing the same thing, we want a diversity of leadership opportunities. And we're very creative. We understand how difficult it is, with COVID to be able to get some things in there. So we're pretty creative with what we are allowing to be credited. Now, even with your leadership, your PLC leadership, that counts as some of your hours. So when you're meeting with your team, count that as some of your hours towards your internship because you're leading. Anytime you are showing, you're showing yourself as a leader or proving yourself as a leader, you can count those as part of your internship hours. See, at one time it was you could get credit for helping out with bus duty or game duties, and but see, right now a lot of that you can't do that now. So
Okay.
so we will. It will be hard for you not to get credit for what you're doing. It would have to be just off the wall stuff if you didn't get credit for it.
And Joel, if I could just add to that, you may get 100 hours or 120 hours in a semester. Go ahead and show all that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Dr. Revis and Dr. Stedman, my administrator has been assigning me to go to a lot of trainings and shadowings for the administrators in the building. Like I sat in on teacher observation. I've done, I had to do database training. Does that count as well?
Yes, absolutely, Latasha.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are very good leadership experiences.
Yes.
And I would say, if you feel like that your principal is not giving you those leadership opportunities, first and foremost, it's your responsibility to go to them and have some ideas and make yourself available to that principal. But that's when you would call back on your CC1 if you are not able to get your hours in. And they could come back in and have a conversation with your principal. You know, you guys could brainstorm on some ideas because we are in unprecedented times. We're having to just be creative. And so that's okay, but you would fall back on your CC1 for that.
Okay, Deshira, I know that this was a private message, but I need to make sure if there's anybody else that has not heard from their CC1, go ahead and let Dr. Revis and me know now. Just tell us if there's anybody else. We need your name so we can let Dr. Lamb know after tonight that that you've not heard from someone, because everybody should have been assigned one at this point, and it could. I can see where it could be an oversight sometimes. So I need to know, is there anybody else who has not heard from their CC1, or you don't know who that person is? Okay, Shira, I have yours, and I'm going to take care of that tonight with Dr. Lamb. Is there anybody else? So everybody else has had that experience. And again, if you have not, well, just let us know if there's a problem. Are there any other questions? Again, we're very proud of you, Dr. Revis, and you're really proving yourselves well early in this semester, and we're very proud of the work that you're doing. So just keep up the good jobs. Very proud of you. Dr.
Have a
Revis?
great week. Have a great week. And if you need anything, we're only an email or phone call away.
Okay. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.